please give us your name?
Jeffrey Epstein.
Jeffrey Epstein.
It is October 2007. It is warm in West Palm Beach, Florida. As is often the case, the sun is shining, palm trees sway in the breeze, and the sound of the ocean can be heard in the distance. On this October morning, two men meet. They have known each other for a long time. You would never guess from their demeanor that this is a business meeting rather than a casual get-together. Nor is it apparent what they are discussing over breakfast. The two are talking about a 53-page indictment that has just been prepared by the authorities and how the defendant will get out of this. It is December 2001 when the phone rings at the Palm Beach Police Department in Florida, in the Organized Crime and Narcotics Division. It's the colleagues from West Palm Beach with a hot tip. There were reports that a woman named Ghislaine Maxwell had allegedly hired a young woman from Palm Beach State College to come to her home. A total of 3 young women were reportedly approached directly on campus. She allegedly said she needed a young, pretty, unmarried woman to do office work at her home, just on a daily basis, for $200 in cash. One of the women reported that most of the calls received were from men announcing that they would be dropping off girls at Maxwell's house. 2 of the 3 women claimed to have been inappropriately touched by a man. They also report seeing many nude photos of women topless by the pool, and that they generally had a strange feeling in that house. However, they never observed anything illegal apart from the indecent touching. That sounds strange enough, at least, for the West Palm Beach police to look into it. However, they quickly realized that the house does not belong to Ghislaine Maxwell, but to Jeffrey Epstein. They approach the matter discreetly at first and search the dumpsters on the street. Inside, the officers find nude photos, massage instructions, and a list titled, "People I Want to Meet." The list contains the names of young women, along with their phone numbers, ages, and occupations. However, the investigators find no evidence of a crime, so the investigation is closed without results in April 2002. Two years later, in March 2004, the Palm Beach Police Department received another call. Once again, it concerned Jeffrey Epstein's house. A woman called to file a complaint against Epstein. She claimed that he had repeatedly asked her to undress during a meeting, but she had refused. 5 days later, the police called her back. Since she did not answer, the officers left a message. After that, none of the officers contacted her again, and the matter fizzled out. In August 2004, a police officer submitted a tip directly. While on patrol, he was flagged down by a taxi driver who had apparently just had a strange fare. The driver had dropped off 2 young girls in front of the Epstein estate. They were all alone. He was certain that the girls were not yet 18. During the ride, the 2 girls had been talking about how much money they had made lately by dating men in Palm Beach. Again, nothing is done. Nor in November 2004, when the police are alerted to a vehicle parked in front of Epstein's estate. A young woman is sitting inside. She says she is waiting for someone to come out of the house and bring her an envelope that Jeffrey Epstein had left there for her. It contains money for massages. Many young girls in the area do that. While the girl is still sitting in the car with a police officer, her cell phone rings. Her mother calls her, and the girl apologizes, saying she has to go to school. It is unclear whether this has anything to do with all these events, but in December 2004, Jeffrey Epstein, the man at the center of all these oddities, donates money to the Palm Beach Police Department, a total of $90,000. But this money will not stop the investigators from finally getting to the bottom of the matter after the next allegation. It is March 14th, 2005. A couple walks into a police station in Palm Beach, Florida. They have a shocking story to tell about their daughter, whom we'll call Mia. Mia attends a special school for students with behavioral issues. There, she had a heated argument with some classmates. One classmate called Mia a prostitute, as her parents learned from the mother of another student involved. The parents would have thought it was just a harmless argument if Mia hadn't had $300 in cash in her pocket, which she couldn't explain where it came from. So Mia's parents confronted her. And during that conversation, the girl confided something to them that made the parents go straight to the police. Mia was approached by an older acquaintance named Haley Robson. Haley told her she knew of a way for Mia to earn a little extra money. Haley said she would just have to give massages to an older guy. In return, she could get at least $200 right away, cash in hand. So Mia and Haley set a date, and on that day, Haley picked up Mia at her home in a car. Mia told her parents that she and Haley were going shopping together. Instead, they drove to a posh estate in Palm Beach. Haley reportedly warned her that if anyone asked how old she was, she should just lie and say she was already 18. Mia says there was a security guard outside who asked what the two of them were doing at the house. When Haley said they were there to see a certain Jeff, they were let in immediately. Mia remembers every detail of the house: the staircase leading upstairs, the bedroom where a massage table had been set up, the many lotions and oils, as well as soap bars shaped like genitals. She also remembers the bathroom right next to that bedroom, with a huge shower and a pink and green patterned sofa. And the man who came into the bedroom wrapped only in a towel. He was introduced to her as Jeff and immediately told Mia to undress and give him a massage. She did just that. During the massage, the man touched himself and also touched her. Mia says she was paid $300 for this. When she recounts this at the Palm Beach Police Headquarters, an investigation is launched immediately this time. Because when Mia is shown several photos of men and asked if one of them is the man she was at home with, she unhesitatingly points to a photo of multimillionaire Jeffrey Epstein. And she wouldn't be the only one. In addition to Mia, several other girls were interviewed in the course of the investigation. A total of 21 victims told a similar story. Someone had invited them to Jeffrey Epstein's home. They were all able to identify him independently in photos. Some said they were picked up by car and driven to Epstein's house. There, Epstein's staff provided snacks for them or cooked for them. They all came to make a little extra money. They were told they just had to give the man a massage and they could earn a few $100s. The girls all report that Epstein asked them to undress during the massage, some down to their underwear, some completely. Most of these girls also describe how Epstein masturbated during these massages. Some also say that Epstein abused them on these occasions. Some of the girls cry during the interviews, others are visibly afraid. They describe feeling very uncomfortable around Epstein, but not wanting to make a scene. One girl says she would like to give a detailed statement, but doesn't dare to. She is afraid that Epstein would target her family. Another girl says she kept her eyes tightly closed while having sex with Epstein and tried to think only about the money. Yet another girl recounts how Epstein asked her how old she was. When she told him, Epstein simply advised her not to tell anyone. She was approached while working a part-time job at the Wellington Mall and asked if she'd like to earn some extra money. She goes on to describe how Epstein gave her extra money to have sex with his then-partner, Nadja Markinkova, although partner isn't really the right word here. Elsewhere, Epstein is said to have referred to Nadja, who was also only 19 at the time, as his Yugoslavian slave. He claimed to have bought her from her family in Eastern Europe. Epstein then watched the two of them. On one occasion, Epstein is said to have pinned the girl who recounts this down and assaulted her, even though she had repeatedly said she didn't want to. Afterward, Epstein is said to have given her a full $1,000 instead of the usual 3-digit sum, likely to silence her. The girls' statements are highly credible to the police, as they were able to describe the layout of Epstein's house in great detail and with precision. Furthermore, the teenagers' accounts corroborate one another. Investigators quickly recognize the pattern that appears to be at work here: targeted approach, invitation, abuse. The police install a video camera near Epstein's estate to monitor who comes and goes. In addition, an airport hangar is monitored for signs of his private jet's arrival and departure. The police also arrange for the garbage collection service to set aside the trash from Epstein's estate so it can be examined. This time, even more material is found than during the first search in 2001. Among the items are special toys and feminine hygiene products, as well as a printed receipt for an Amazon purchase of 3 books, all related to BDSM practices. Additionally, documents containing names and phone numbers. Apparently, papers used to schedule Epstein's massage appointments. For example, one note states that a girl cannot come by on a certain day due to soccer practice. Another says Monday after school. And another note lists a girl's school hours with a note that school ends at 11:30 a.m. and she would come by the next day. The phone numbers of these girls also appear in the call records of Epstein and his assistant Sarah Kellen. She had called many of the girls. As a comparison with Epstein's flight logs shows, this always happened whenever his private jet was in Palm Beach. The number of victims the police have spoken with has now risen to 35. The events date back to at least 2001. So this massage to abuse system appears to have been in operation for at least 4 years by that time. And more victims are coming forward. One of the investigators later says, "I was surprised at how quickly the whole thing took on a life of its own. I thought there would eventually be a final interview, but the next victim gave me 3 or 4 more names, and the next one had 3 or 4 more names, and so the case just kept getting bigger and bigger." It all sounds like a classic pyramid scheme, because Epstein and his accomplices apparently ensure that some of the victims become perpetrators themselves. This also applies to Haley Robson, the young woman who introduced Mia to Epstein. She is one of the first to be questioned by the police. She is only 18 years old herself and attends college. Haley explains to the police that she acts as a sort of agent for Epstein. Haley met Epstein, who was in his early 50s, in exactly the same way as the other girls did, while she was still in high school. A classmate approached Haley and asked her if she was interested in making some extra money. She could easily make some cash. All she had to do was give a man a massage while wearing underwear, and she shouldn't mention her exact age. In return, Haley was promised $200, which is a lot of money, especially when you're still in high school. Just like Mia and the other girls, Haley was taken to Epstein's home and into his bedroom, where the massage table had been set up. Haley says Epstein insisted that she take off all her clothes, so she did. During the massage, Epstein began touching her in intimate places and tried to rape her. Haley slapped his hand away. According to her, Epstein stopped immediately. He said, "Okay, I won't do anything else, but I want you to bring your friend here. I'll give you $200 for every girl you bring here." The younger the better, Haley claims she was told. Haley says that after that, Epstein was always nice to her, like a friend. He was there for her whenever she needed someone. Haley had already experienced abuse before, and during that time, needed someone who made her feel heard and seen. Even if, as with Epstein, this happened under a guise of manipulation. Haley's story illustrates very well how calculatingly Epstein specifically manipulated young girls. At a time when you're vulnerable and feel like no one understands you, you cling to any bit of attention, especially when things aren't easy at home. And on top of that, Epstein dangles the prospect of money in front of girls like Haley. For the multimillionaire, the low three-figure sums are nothing to speak of, but for the girls, $300 is an unimaginable amount of money. With the money Epstein gives her, Haley can finally afford to go on school trips, and she can save money for college. But Haley also uses the money to buy drugs, which she has been using repeatedly ever since she was abused herself. Haley has gone from being a victim to a facilitator. So, over the course of 2 years, Haley repeatedly brings girls to Jeffrey Epstein for supposed massage appointments. But he wasn't always satisfied. Once, Haley introduced a 23-year-old to him, she says. Epstein reportedly said she was too old for him. Haley isn't the only one who did this. As I said, it was a pyramid scheme. It starts with one girl, who in turn tells a few other girls that they can make money with Epstein, who then tell others, and so on. In this way, the perpetrator also shifts the responsibility for recruitment onto the victims. And so, of course, the likelihood that anyone would talk to adults or even the police about it decreases. At least until March 2005, when Mia's parents got wind of it and went to the police. After several months of surveillance, the mansion in Palm Beach is searched. During the search, several photos of naked, young-looking girls are found. Previously, the victims had reported in interviews that they had been photographed. Hidden cameras were also found in the garage area and inside a clock on Epstein's desk. However, several computer hard drives were missing from the house. Investigators believe these may have contained the names and photos of victims. Several surveillance cameras are also missing. Instead, only loose wires hang from the walls and ceilings. A police spokesperson suspects that Epstein had previously received a tip about the search from a mole, and that one of his lawyers had hidden the hard drives and cameras for Epstein in a safe room. As will come to light in 2026, this suspicion is not too far from the truth. In February 2026, it becomes known that Epstein had hired private investigators prior to the police raid to hide items from his estate in a rented storage unit. Among them are 3 computers, 29 address books, and a list of female massage therapists in Florida, though given the context of the case, we can assume that these are likely not professional massage therapists. In addition, several intimate photos were found, presumably of Epstein's victims, as well as dozens of magazines, VHS tapes, and DVDs containing explicit content featuring strikingly young women. There was also a videotape that apparently contained footage of someone in the shower and a woman in lingerie, as well as a 2005 calendar, letters, and lab results. In addition, the private investigators made toys, massage devices, and women's underwear, more than $2,000 in cash, a gun permit, and a Harvard ID disappear. When the police searched Epstein's house in 2005, none of this could be found. Consequently, they were even more reliant on witness testimony than before, but there was plenty of that. 2 of Epstein's former employees told the police that 2 or 3 young-looking girls would come by every day. Another employee said he had been instructed to send a girl a dozen roses after a performance at her high school. Other girls were given free access to a rental car. In addition, Epstein promised to help the girls get into good colleges or modeling or acting schools. At least 2 of the victims told the police that they were in love with Epstein. So here too, we see the relationship of dependency once again. Mia, who set everything in motion, was herself at a kind of special school for students with behavioral issues. It's not too far-fetched to speculate that he specifically sought out girls who, for whatever reason, had personal problems. First, because they would be more likely to trust him, and second, because their credibility could easily be called into question during any potential investigation. Courtney White, who met Epstein in 2002, believes this as well. Courtney says that Epstein also got her to bring more girls her age to his house, much like Haley Robson. Courtney estimates that she introduced him to about 70 or 80 girls between 2002 and 2004. Most of these girls come from difficult backgrounds, from financially disadvantaged families, single-parent households, or foster homes. Mothers who were abused by their husbands and boyfriends. Fathers who abused and beat them. One girl is said to have witnessed her stepfather kill her 8-year-old stepbrother. In short, these are girls who desperately needed stability and generosity, and who, unfortunately, apparently found none of that anywhere except with Epstein. Several of the girls also speak of peers they had seen at Epstein's house, many of whom did not speak English. Accordingly, the police suspected even back then that Epstein's activities were not limited to Palm Beach. In the flight logs of Epstein's private jet, one finds female names among the passengers, as well as the names of several famous and powerful individuals who had also flown with him. Among them is the name Jean-Luc Brunel. He is a French modeling agent. The logs show that Brunel flew on Epstein's private jet 25 times between 1998 and 2005. In addition, the two spoke regularly on the phone. During the 2005 raid, 2 notes written by Epstein's assistants were found in his trash. It apparently had to do with messages that were to be relayed to Epstein from his French friend. In the first note, Brunel mentioned that he had found a teacher who could teach him Russian. She is young and not blonde. The lessons are free, and he could take the first session right away if he called. In the other note, he boasted that he had just scored a good one. 18 years old, she approached him and said, "I love Jeffrey." The investigation into Jeffrey Epstein regarding the massage parlor abuse ring was already underway in 2005 when Jeffrey Epstein helped his friend Jean-Luc Brunel start a business. In part 1 of the video series, we discussed how Epstein built his network and how he sought out contacts in all kinds of industries. A friendship also developed with Jean-Luc Brunel, and this despite, or perhaps precisely because, Brunel had not had a good reputation since the late 1980s. There were allegations of exploitation and coercion. In 2005, Jeffrey Epstein provided Brunel with financial startup assistance. This allowed Brunel to establish his own modeling agency, MC2, from a branch office of a French company in the US. As one might suspect, this is a deliberate allusion to Einstein's famous formula E equals mc squared, E for Epstein. Brunel is known for specifically scouting models in economically disadvantaged regions of South American or Eastern European countries. The friendship between Epstein and Brunel has lasted for decades. Even while the investigation was ongoing, they flew together to Ecuador in 2006 for a contest for up-and-coming models sponsored by MC2. The winner, who was subsequently signed to a contract, is from Latvia and is 14 years old. This isn't illegal, but it's at least morally questionable, and given the allegations against Epstein and Brunel, deeply troubling. Today, 20 years later, investigators are looking into the suspicion that Brunel may have organized the transportation and accommodation of young women for Jeffrey Epstein. Witness statements to this effect go back a long way. Brunel is said to have pulled off something similar in France to what Epstein did in Palm Beach. One victim describes Brunel as a repulsive little garden gnome who forced himself on the young women he was supposed to protect. Another finds it only logical that Epstein and Brunel would have found each other and joined forces. She says, Brunel had access to a network of young women and was already prone to behaving this way. When he came into contact with Epstein, they realized they could do this together. He is just as guilty as Epstein, if not even more so. He promoted and fueled the machinery of abuse. Maritza Vasquez has recently described exactly how this is said to have worked. She worked for years in the accounting department of Brunel's modeling agency, MC2. She reports that the modeling agency had girls living in Miami Beach and New York. However, this was not so they could establish themselves as models there, but so they could attend his so-called parties in Palm Beach and Manhattan, Epstein's two places of residence. The prospect of a modeling career was supposedly just a lure to entice them there. In New York, both models and Brunel himself are said to have lived in the same building as Epstein at times. Epstein's staff, in turn, confirms having seen Brunel multiple times at his Palm Beach mansion, where the massage incidents took place. Maritza goes on to say that in 2004, after a modeling show, she heard that Brunel was in his hotel room with one of the participants. Virginia Giffrey, one of the most well-known victims in the Epstein case, also speaks of Brunel's significant involvement. She claims that he and Epstein made numerous promises to foreign girls, luring them to the US and systematically abusing them there. Giffrey calls Brunel Epstein's main source for girls from other countries. Jean-Luc Brunel did not make his only public statement regarding his relationship with Epstein until 2015. In it, he denies ever having been part of Epstein's scheme. Jean-Luc Brunel is no longer alive. He was arrested in France in 2020 on suspicion of abuse, multiple assaults, and harassment, and specifically for organizing the transport and accommodation of young women on behalf of Jeffrey Epstein. However, Brunel took his own life in prison in 2022. Accordingly, any possible involvement in the Epstein case could never be legally proven. However, in February 2026, the French Public Prosecutor's Office announced the formation of a special unit. Its task is to examine the Epstein files for possible involvement by French citizens. At the same time, the Brunel case is also set to be reopened, so the final word has not yet been spoken here. In 2005 and 2006, while Epstein was under investigation in Palm Beach, contact between him and Brunel continued in any case. In any case, for Epstein, life seems to be continuing as normal. And this, despite the fact that the police are on the trail of a massive pyramid scheme involving abuse. Yet Jeffrey Epstein will once again manage to extricate himself from the affair through threats and shady deals with the prosecutor's office. As mentioned earlier, as part of their investigation in the mid-2000s, the police interviewed numerous witnesses and potential victims. Among them was a witness who had apparently been referred to them by others. However, she testified that nothing inappropriate had occurred between her and Epstein. But the police asked her another very important question: whether she might have spoken to anyone about the investigation and the interview before the police approached her. And indeed, a private investigator had contacted her. A former employee of Epstein also says that a private investigator met with him to discuss what he would tell the police regarding Epstein. At least once, a private investigator is said to have posed as a police officer. The household trash of the lead police investigator is now also being searched, not by his colleagues, but presumably by Epstein's people. Another investigator feels so harassed that he takes a different route to work every day and regularly switches his official vehicle. Epstein hires several top lawyers at once, including Alan Dershowitz, whom he has known since the 1990s from Harvard. Alan Dershowitz was a professor there when he met Epstein. Epstein's former employer, Bear Stearns, managed his investments in the 1990s. Through Epstein, Dershowitz ended up at Les Wexner's birthday dinner, sitting side by side with U.S. senators and politicians like the former Israeli prime minister. And now, Dershowitz is supposed to represent Epstein as more and more allegations come pouring in. As far as their stance on the issue is concerned, Epstein and Dershowitz seem to be in broad agreement. At the very least, a year after meeting Epstein, Dershowitz wrote an op-ed in the LA Times. In it, he essentially argues that, in his opinion, the age of consent should be lowered to at least 15. It comes as little surprise that Epstein would hire someone like that for his defense. Epstein's second attorney is Jared Lefkert, who has previously represented numerous Hollywood stars. Lefkert says the police acted outrageously toward Epstein. His client would deny that any inappropriate conduct experiment ever took place. He also points out that Epstein passed a polygraph test when questioned on this matter and denied everything. It is explained that Epstein simply enjoys getting massages. This is important to him on a spiritual level. To underscore this, the Florida Ballet receives a donation of $100,000 so that the dancers can also afford massages. However, Dershowitz, Lefkert, and their colleagues are even more actively working to bring the matter to a close as quietly as possible for their client, Jeffrey Epstein. As early as 2006, the New York Times reported on inconsistencies surrounding the investigation into multimillionaire Jeffrey Epstein. The question is raised as to whether he might have received preferential treatment due to his wealth and prominence. The newspaper is not alone in this view. Even before charges were filed, the Palm Beach police chief leveled accusations against the district attorney's office. The police chief accused the prosecutors of giving Epstein special treatment. He even called on the prosecutor in charge, Barry Krischer, to recuse himself from the case. As a spokeswoman for the Palm Beach Police Department explained, the district attorney's office had already been contacted by the police in 2006 with a request to issue an arrest warrant for Jeffrey Epstein. Instead, the police were told that the prosecutor would convene a grand jury. The grand jury was to review the available evidence and decide which charges, if any, should be filed.
The grand jury is essentially a panel of laypeople. Between 16 and 23 citizens from a district are randomly selected and summoned by the local state attorney, in Florida, for example, by Barry Krischer. The prosecution presents one-sided evidence and witnesses. If at least 12 members vote in favor, an indictment against the defendant is issued. If fewer than 12 votes are cast, the proceedings are suspended for the time being. In fact, a date for such a grand jury hearing has already been set for February 2006. 3 of the victims are scheduled to testify, even though the Palm Beach Police Department had long since identified more. The police chief also states that the prosecution had already told him in advance that they did not intend to file charges against any of the victims over the age of 16, unless there were exceptional circumstances. This would mean that only the allegations involving those under 16 would be prosecuted. But even this hearing never takes place. According to police documents, Epstein's attorney Dershowitz is said to have met with members of the district attorney's office. During the meeting, he is alleged to have shared information about the plaintiff, including statements she had posted on MySpace regarding her use of marijuana and alcohol. Epstein's lawyers intended to use this to cast doubt on the plaintiff's credibility, and it appears to have worked. According to the police, the prosecution, led by Barry Krischer, subsequently decided to postpone the scheduled grand jury session by several months. And this, despite the fact that the allegations involved systematic exploitation. In the weeks following the postponement, two families of victims came forward to the police. They reported that they had been harassed or threatened by Epstein's private investigators. The father of one victim recounted that someone had even tried to force his car off the road. Another parent came forward and reported that a source close to Epstein had contacted them and said that those who help him will be compensated, and those who harm him will be held accountable. The police reported these incidents to the district attorney's office. After all, influencing or intimidating witnesses is, of course, not permitted. Yet, once again, there were no consequences. A grand jury hearing scheduled for April has been canceled at the last minute. Prosecutors and Barry Krischer have long since stopped answering calls and emails from the Palm Beach Police Department. At the outset, Krischer had assured investigators that Epstein would definitely be put behind bars for life. But the tide has turned. The Palm Beach Police Department has not let up, despite this, or perhaps precisely because of it, and on May 1st, 2006, once again asked the district attorney's office to issue an arrest warrant for Epstein. The arrest warrant lists 5 victims of crimes who have experienced some form of abuse by Epstein. In doing so, the police are actually already accommodating the district attorney's office. If Epstein had been found guilty of the 5 listed offenses, the maximum sentence would have been 75 years in prison. But as we know, that did not happen. The police also request arrest warrants for Haley Robson and Epstein's assistant, Sarah Kellen. Instead, however, it is reiterated that they should wait for a grand jury decision. When the time finally comes on July 19th, the entire hearing lasts less than 4 hours. Only 2 of the victims are ultimately summoned to testify, along with 2 police officers. One of the 2 victims is Mia. She has to explain again what happened during her visit to Epstein's house. She recounts how she was asked to strip down to her underwear, how she massaged Epstein, and how he used the vibrator. She also admits to having lied about her age, just as Haley Robson had instructed her to do beforehand. It is clearly uncomfortable for Mia to recount this in front of a row of complete strangers. But instead of empathy, they ask Mia some rather direct questions. Among other things, about her posts on MySpace, her piercings, her alcohol consumption, and her revealing style of dress. They point, among other things, to a MySpace post in which she brags about shoplifting, and to another in which she wrote that she would earn $250,000. Mia explains to the jury that this is obviously an internet joke, but they apparently don't understand that, or don't want to understand it. And even when it comes to her visit to Epstein, the jurors are more than direct. Instead of addressing Epstein's criminal activities, the jury points out to the witness that she unknowingly committed a crime of prostitution after she had just recounted her own abuse. The other witness testifying stated that she visited Epstein about 10 times. He knew her exact age. She reports that the assaults by Epstein gradually escalated. She didn't want to sleep with him, but she didn't say no either. She, too, is accused of criminal acts, with a very specific goal in mind. Because instead of being charged with abuse, Epstein is charged with aggravated solicitation of prostitution, in a single case. Age is completely disregarded in determining the sentence. The maximum penalty would be a mere 5 years in prison. After the indictment, Jeffrey Epstein was transferred to the Palm Beach County Jail on July 23, 2006. And just a few hours later, he was released on $3,000 bail. For Epstein, that was pocket change. The lead investigators in Palm Beach have publicly apologized to the victims. For 2 years, they tried to secure justice for them, but failed to do so at the grand jury stage. The Palm Beach police officers were not swayed by the $90,000 donation that Epstein had previously sent them. Instead, the department is even returning the entire sum. All the police can do now is hand the case over to the FBI. The FBI was already informed in the mid-90s about Epstein's abusive behavior. However, the FBI did not follow up on the leads in the 90s. You can hear more about this in episode 1 of this video series. Now, the Epstein file is back on their desk. The documents list the potential crime as child prostitution. He is also suspected of trafficking young women, often from abroad, for parties at his other homes in Manhattan, New Mexico, and the Caribbean. In November 2006, the FBI begins interviewing potential witnesses and victims from Florida, New York, and New Mexico. Meanwhile, Jeffrey Epstein is free to move about again and pick up exactly where he left off, both in business and in his private life. And this despite the fact that on the other side of the US, in New York, another lawsuit is filed against him. In October 2007, while the FBI investigation is still ongoing, Maximilia Cordero of New York files a lawsuit against Epstein. Maximilia is 23 at the time and claims to have been sexually assaulted by Jeffrey Epstein in 2000. Epstein allegedly promised to advance her modeling career if she slept with him in return. He is said to have lured her several times to his mansion on Manhattan's Upper East Side. Under pressure from Epstein, Maximilia allegedly engaged in, to quote, bizarre and unnatural acts. Among other things, Epstein is said to have told her, "I love how young you are. You have a tight butt like a baby." Incidentally, the lawsuit also mentions Jeffrey Epstein's close friend and business partner Les Wexner of Victoria's Secret. The lawsuit alleges that Wexner knowingly allowed Epstein to use the Victoria's Secret brand to harass models. This aligns with reports that may also be familiar from episode 1. Early on, young women reported that Epstein had posed to them as a modeling agent for Victoria's Secret. Maximilia also states that Epstein asked her to bring her friends along. He is said to have remarked, "I love girls your age." Furthermore, Maximilia was experiencing mental health issues at the time of the events. Much like the victims in Palm Beach, she was thus in a vulnerable situation that Epstein exploited. Epstein's attorney, however, has had rather dismissive words for the new allegations. It took 7 years for the lawsuit to be filed. The woman has admitted that she's crazy, but she knew how to read a newspaper, and she knew the word rich. So what he's implying here is that there couldn't have been any abuse because Maximilian didn't come forward for 7 years, and she's only doing it now because she's hoping for money. And the press is on Epstein's side. Because instead of New York Magazine reporting on the serious allegations against Epstein, a large, secretly taken photo of Maximilian ends up in the paper. In it, she is outed as a trans woman. The entire article is written in a mocking tone and uses male pronouns throughout. It doesn't stop with this article. In another on the subject, attorney Levkert is quoted. He does not comment on the serious allegations against his client, but instead mocks the plaintiff's gender identity. Another article claims that Maximilian is a liar and a transvestite who pretended to have been abused by Epstein in order to extort money. Fittingly, Epstein's then press secretary, Howard Rubenstein, works for the New York Post. We can only speculate about a connection here, but I think the matter is obvious. This is also true for Maximilian Cordero, who is now suing not only Jeffrey Epstein, but also the New York Post for defamation. In addition to the tasteless articles, the journalists are alleged to have contacted Maximilian's relatives and falsely told them that she was suffering from sexually transmitted diseases. Maximilian also accuses the magazine of violating laws protecting medical privacy in order to destroy her image. Maximilian's lawyer sums this up as a malicious smear campaign designed to abuse a victim of abuse a second time. Only later, with the release of the Epstein files, will it become clear what happened next. Maximilian's silence was bought. After she was defamed by the press and her circle was allegedly harassed by Epstein's people, Epstein and Les Waxner paid Maximilian $28,000. In return, she agreed never to file a civil lawsuit against Epstein again or make public accusations against him. Maximilian agreed after having already been subjected to this alleged smear campaign for 2 years at that point. Maximilian has since disappeared from the scene surrounding the Epstein complex. The Maximilian Cordero case is presumably just one of many, and incidentally, also highlights the transphobia that prevailed in U.S. society and is currently on the rise again. The defamatory articles against her are still online at New York Magazine.
Now that the matter with Maximilia Cordero has been settled, Epstein's lawyers are still actively working on the FBI investigation. The FBI has only just begun to stir up a hornet's nest, but Epstein's legal team is determined to prevent them from digging any deeper, and will succeed in doing so for the time being. By May 2007, a federal agency within the U.S. Department of Justice was already preparing a case against Epstein. In fact, as early as 2007, the Epstein case was on the verge of being handled on the largest possible scale. Because also in May 2007, Jeffrey Epstein's team requests a personal meeting. Although the U.S. Attorney's Office drafts a 53-page indictment, negotiations with Epstein's legal team begin at the same time. In October 2007, Jay Lefkowitz meets with a man named Alexander Acosta. You may remember him as the 27th Secretary of Labor of the United States during Donald Trump's first term. In 2007, Acosta's cabinet post was still a long way off. Even back then, Acosta was being considered for several positions in the White House. At the time, the Republican was primarily the U.S. Attorney in Miami, appointed by then-President George W. Bush. Both Alexander Acosta and Epstein's attorney Jay Lefkowitz began their careers in the same legal circles. Perhaps that is why it doesn't seem particularly unusual that the two are meeting not in an office, but for breakfast at a hotel. What the two agree upon during this breakfast will change the lives of dozens, perhaps hundreds, perhaps even thousands of former, current, and future victims. Jeffrey Epstein will plead guilty and go to prison. However, only for 13 months and in exchange for incredible terms. Acosta and Epstein's lawyers negotiate a plea deal and thus the so-called non-prosecution agreement. This non-prosecution agreement will essentially bring an end to the then ongoing FBI investigation into whether there were additional victims and other powerful individuals involved in Epstein's crimes. In return, Epstein pleads guilty in court to 2 counts of prostitution. Epstein and 4 accomplices named in the agreement receive immunity from all federal criminal charges. Furthermore, the agreement includes a clause granting immunity to all potential co-conspirators who were also involved in Epstein's crimes. It is not made clear who these potential co-conspirators might be, so there is still plenty of speculation today about who among Epstein's influential and famous circle of acquaintances might have been such a co-conspirator. In addition, the following points are agreed upon. 1. The victims will not be notified. 2. The agreement will be kept under wraps. 3. All subpoenas to appear before the grand jury will be rescinded. The remainder of 2007 is spent negotiating the finer points, in Epstein's favor, of course. This is because the first draft of the agreement stipulates that a special master should appoint an attorney to represent the rights of Epstein's victims to civil compensation. But multimillionaire Jeffrey Epstein apparently does not want to pay any compensation. One of Epstein's attorneys requests that the agreement be reviewed at the highest level,
at the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington. Another point that the Epstein team is not yet satisfied with is that the agreement requires him to register as a sex offender. As a result, the decision on a final agreement keeps getting pushed back. And that, in turn, means that the FBI can conduct further investigations in the meantime. As late as spring 2008, the FBI finds additional witnesses and evidence. These are apparently so compelling that preparations are once again made for a new hearing at the federal level. The prosecution notes that some of the victims are being harassed by Epstein's lawyers, something that had already been reported by the Palm Beach police 2 years earlier. It is only at this point that Epstein's lawyers apparently become concerned that they have gotten themselves into a quagmire. In June 2008, they resume negotiations for a plea deal based on the agreement between Acosta and Lefkowitz, and that same month, a court date is set for Epstein in Palm Beach. Although he had resisted it earlier in the year, he now pleads guilty. 1 count for soliciting prostitution, and 1 for soliciting prostitution with a minor. Jeffrey Epstein is sentenced to 18 months in prison, followed by 1 year of community service or house arrest, and he is classified as a convicted sex offender. The victims only learn of all this a month later. They had no opportunity to appear in court where they could have raised their objections. In the victims' view, the U.S. Attorney's Office violated the federal law on the rights of crime victims. Among other things, this includes the right to be informed about plea agreements and to be present at the sentencing hearing. But a month later, the victims are informed that the federal investigation has already been concluded and Epstein has already been taken to prison. The victims intend to take action against this as well. However, the U.S. Attorney's Office opposes releasing the documents related to Epstein's plea deal. The victims were completely ignored throughout this process, even though it was supposed to be about them and their rights. Jeffrey Epstein also receives special treatment regarding his incarceration. He is not sent to a regular correctional facility, but is instead confined to a private wing of the Palm Beach County Jail. And not even 24 hours a day. He is granted work release privileges. This allows him to leave the jail for a full 12 hours, 6 days a week, to work in his office. Conveniently, he can work for his own nonprofit organization, the Florida Science Foundation. He founded it just before he began his sentence, and, spoiler alert, it was dissolved shortly after his release. For this so-called work, Epstein is also allowed to receive guests in his office. Although records were supposed to be kept of this, all documents have since been destroyed. However, female visitors are said to have been among these guests. It stands to reason that not much has likely changed in Epstein's life. According to official regulations, sex offenders are actually expressly not entitled to work release. But if this case demonstrates anything, it is that different rules apparently apply to a wealthy and influential person like Epstein. In prison, he is only there to sleep, 7 days a week, and even there he isn't doing too badly. A prison guard has arranged for the door to Epstein's cell not to be locked. He also has free access to an office where a television is set up, and of course, he is allowed to receive visitors. His French model agent friend, Jean-Luc Brunel, alone comes to see Epstein in prison more than 70 times. After a while, he doesn't even have to stay in the prison cell. Conveniently, the prison's former infirmary wing is currently empty. Inmate Epstein moves in there without further ado, on the condition that he covers the costs for the security personnel supervising him there. One of the deputy sheriffs assigned to monitor Epstein says he was told his job was, quote, to ensure Epstein's safety. The officers who monitored him were required to wear suits and greet inmate Epstein upon his arrival, the report continues. In the internal report, Jeffrey Epstein is rarely referred to as an inmate, but very often as a client. Sometimes he is called Mr. Epstein, and 2 of the officers address him by his first name. As early as July 2009, Jeffrey Epstein is released from his so-called detention, 5 months before the scheduled date. In exchange, he is on probation for a year and under house arrest. He is only allowed to stay at his home in Palm Beach and in his office, but even that doesn't interest Epstein. As flight logs will show, during this time he regularly travels to his mansion in New York and his private island. What I actually found most shocking during the research for this episode was how much of this was already known long before the Epstein files. Much of the information comes from articles from the 2000s, but has been repackaged as new revelations in recent months. It's shocking how all of this was allowed to happen right under everyone's noses. This isn't just about the victims not being believed, they were essentially made invisible. We'll talk more about this in the next episodes, so feel free to subscribe to the channel to stay up to date. Other than that, there isn't much more to say. I wish you a good morning, afternoon, or evening, whichever time you're watching this, and hope to see you again in the next video. Until then, ciao everyone.